Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. So Nat, I don't know what it was like when you grew up, but IQ was kind of a thing based on how intelligent you were. And I remember at one point with a very smart brother reading an article that says you're only 10 points away from your siblings in terms of IQ. So I actually felt pretty good about my IQ. Have you ever done a test?
I was like, I'm trying to desperately think what that makes me feel. No, I've never done a test. I think that was maybe more of a North American, because I feel like in North America there was a lot more standardized testing and stuff. But I do know and have noticed amongst parents, everyone thinks their child is spectacular and every single child is unique and amazing. But it's amazing how high IQ gifted. And yeah, it is funny, but no, it's not something that I ever did. Imagine finding out that you're at the wrong end.
You're dum-dum.
At the wrong end of the spectrum.
You're a moron. Do you know where some of those derogatory terms came from? They came from the IQ test. And when you scored at a certain level, like moron, that's where moron came from.
Oh my gosh, is that actually a level?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know that. The only thing I found out recently, I did statistics at high school, and it was only when you said to your child, I don't want you to do cabbage maths, that I found out I did cabbage maths. I thought I did a really hard maths. And honestly, statistics has served me quite well.
And even I've noticed in schooling, all schooling streams, and so then all the parents are like, what group is your son in? Or your kids might be like, I'm a bear, and you're like, wah, wah.
That's probably the other thing for me is I never went to schools like that. We never had head people. We never had streaming. I think my parents, I don't know if they were into it or out of it, but my parents were, on reflection of how they raised me, never into that sort of thing.
Okay. Well, newsflash, it's all streaming now. Every school has groups, and they do it, to be fair.
I don't know if my school, I will check on my high school. I'm pretty sure they still don't, but
No, not high school. Not high school. They do it in primary school. And the reason they do it is because you need to be grouped. They need to be able to teach to a certain reading level and a math level. And so they group kids who can work on similar problems together. So it's why they do it. Simplicity. There's huge data and research, no doubt, with streaming and how horrible it is, because it's really hard to jump up once you're put in
once you're pigeonholed.
That's right.
So long story short, though, you are most likely a genius or within 10% of, and there is not zero chance that I'm a moron.
I do remember having a boss earlier in my career who was part of Mensa, and I thought I'd heard of Mensa. I'm pretty sure Bill Gates is Mensa. That is the passageway to get into Mensa. And once you're in Mensa, it's like this club of really high IQ people. So there you go. Another networking opportunity there if you've got high IQ.
And can I just ask a moron question? What is IQ? Like, what is it based on? Is it based on your ability to read and remember? Is it based on your ability to, like, what is the, like, is it solving maths problems? Like, is it right? Like, I don't know.
It's a mix. Yeah. And it's a little bit looking at the SAT exam as my son contemplates US college, maybe one day. It is a mix of reading and comprehension and understanding. There's logic, so ability to connect the dots. And then, yes, there is math. And then I even remember there's things like, do you remember sequences and patterns and figuring out what is the next one? And maybe that goes under logic. But yes, it is standardized testing that tests your intelligence in a number of areas and then gives you a score as a result.
Yeah, okay, no, that makes sense. As with all of these things, being really high on one may mean you are lower on another. And, there's a combination that probably, yeah.
So for all of
morons like me, there's hope.
Then came along this concept of EQ, an emotional quotient. And we finally realized in this knowledge economy that building relationships and being able to relate to people and coach people and motivate people, but also own your own emotions as we go through our careers. And that's EQ.
That totally makes sense. And I think the example that I heard of a lot, probably about 10 years ago, was doctors. And at the time, a lot of people who went to medical school, it was purely IQ. It was top of your grades and everything. And what they found is bedside manner was severely lacking. And a lot of cases, and you had these incredible geniuses, but they were really uncomfortable communicating, and that led to, in many cases, poorer patient outcomes. So they started to go, how do we actually also bring in the EQ and have doctors, or if that is a lower measure for you, that you focus less on patient fronting areas. So just like that was the primary example, but you can see it in every situation that you need to be able to interact with other humans to do a lot of jobs.
Well, and I think it's playing out, as we know, in some of the largest tech companies in the world, including Elon Musk. They'd have crazy high IQs, but it doesn't mean that they're garnering a lot of love from their employees or people around them because of problematic EQ. But then comes along AQ, and that's what we're chatting about today. This concept of adaptability quotient. Change is constant, and our ability to adapt is what is going to create success in the future, not necessarily our IQ, and to some extent our EQ, but actually this concept of AQ. And the interesting point here is that IQ and maybe EQ to some extent is fixed. You know, it's personality traits. It is how we're wired.
I know people who do those cryptic crosswords, and the more you practice solving logic puzzles and the more you practice like math, the better you're going to get at it. So like there must be an element in there of
it's relatively fixed is what you've got the brain you've got, and you're going to be working with the brain you've got, but it's relatively fixed. Is IQ.
I could do calculus.
Yeah, you could. Of course you could. Of course you could.
I actually don't know if I could. I wasn't really into it. Boring.
But the great thing though, if we're relying on AQ going forward, it is not fixed and it can be developed. Every single time you put yourself into an uncomfortable position or you learn something new, you are adapting to new situation, new scenario, new skill. And so it's limitless. And we know that uncertainty is the only certainty. I read a stat of this half-life of skills is shrinking. And I was like, what the hell is half-life of skills? And half-life of skills...
Kristen, if you had a higher IQ, you'd know that.
I had to read what half-life of skills meant. And it's the time that it takes for a skill to lose half of its relevance or value in the workplace. Fine. But half-life of skills is shrinking faster than ever right now. And what you learned 3 years ago might already be outdated. So I found that really interesting. So, and then the other interesting little fact, which you might appreciate. Did you know that the mobile phone today, our cell phones, have more computing power than NASA had when they sent people to the moon?
Okay, I'm going to tackle that one first because of course I do, because I listened to 30 Minutes to the Moon. Was it called 30 Minutes to the Moon? Brilliant
13
podcast.
seconds. 13 seconds.
13 seconds something. 13 minutes. I think it's 13 minutes. Everyone should listen to that podcast. It's amazing. But that half-life, like I'm thinking about it even when we think about things like the rise of platforms. So like Instagram, when you think about the rise of Instagram, which was actually, I think, 2010 Instagram started, and now it's sort of through its half-life, I would imagine, and we're moving on to different things. So if you are a marketer, for example, learning all of those different platforms, many of those tools and even digital advertising, all of those things are changing so quickly that for a long time, digital advertising was the cheapest way to transition out of very data-based generic advertising into really specific advertising. But now that's moved again. So all of these skills you have to develop, suddenly you're like, oh no, now the world's moved on. And now I have to think about organic marketing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's actually amazing just when you apply it to some of the different things that we have to do in our daily work to go, oh yeah, that's true. It's already changed again.
And I think the willingness and ability to adapt to the latest marketing thing, that's the key. The ability to constantly look forward and be curious about the next thing to master. That is what I think is key.
To your point, if I was stuck in that mindset of, but I've got this skill and I've spent 5 years learning it and I want to keep applying it, I will be making the wrong choices in my career because I will be using old technology to do things that are no longer relevant and get myself into a bit of a pickle getting my next job. And so it's just, I feel like if everyone was to pause listening to this podcast and think about all the tools they've had to use, even how we talk on Slack and Teams now, like the ability to communicate via Messenger is very different to when many of us started out. That everything is always changing. So your ability to go, that was fun, enjoyed that, felt comfortable for a minute, Gonna have to let that one go now and move on to the next thing.
I know, and embrace it, which isn't easy because we've talked about that quite a bit, the amygdala and our lizard brains and how it's protecting us from change and new things. So we're like overcoming, I think, what do they call it? Adaptability paradox, that it's really hard to change because we like comfort and status quo, but then we have to in order to survive, which is thanks, brain. We're going to do a quiz, okay? Okay, so this is for everyone listening, and Nat, feel free to add up your scores in your head as we go. There's 5 questions, and you're going to rate yourself on 1 to 5 on these questions, and we're going to figure out your AQ. We don't have to.
So is 5 really good, is like comfortable or good, and 1 is really uncomfortable or bad?
Yeah, so you're going to rate yourself from 1 to 5, being 1. Not like really. I'd rate myself low on that question. 5, I'm like nailing it. And this is so you don't have to go take an online IQ test or have people tell you have high EQ. You literally just listen to Power Up Podcast and you can rate yourself out of 15. Okay, question number 1. How comfortable are you with ambiguity and uncertainty? Pick your score, your gut instinct. Number 2. How quickly do you recover from setbacks? When was the last time you learned a completely new skill? 1 being, can't remember, 5 being, yesterday, recently. Number 4, how often do you seek out perspectives that challenge your own? And finally, how frequently do you change your mind when presented with new evidence? I found that one quite interesting. So if you scored under 15 and
the math numpty here is counting on my fingers.
Do it. Don't worry. But the thing is like everyone rate yourself, and we're probably a bit biased to be fair, as we rate our own selves. That's what I think is really interesting maybe about how other people perceive your adaptability.
I would like to go through them because I feel like this is the challenging one. Like comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. I rated myself a 4 there because I actually feel pretty comfortable with it. But then I think about friends of mine who just spend their lives traveling the world. They will like not know what their next job looks like. They don't necessarily care about money in their bank account. And I go, compared to them, I am like a 1. And so I feel like some of these questions, when you see the people who are at the extreme end of it, I feel like
that's a fair point.
Because I'm like, I like to have a house that I live in that I know I can come back to. I like to have a financial safety net. I like to know what my work looks like. So I'm like, oh, that's actually a really hard question to answer.
Yeah. Learned a completely new skill. I think we'd be pretty high on those ones because we just have to figure stuff out all the time,
I was like,
right?
I was 5. I was 5. We have just learned renewals.
But seeking out perspectives that challenge your own. And we're going to get to this as an action at the end. But this one, I wouldn't rate myself as high on. No way. My feed is my feed, and it is that algorithm. It is my echo chamber, as is my news and my podcast. Like, they really are. And that's an area where I could stretch, to be fair. And then
great.
How frequently do you change your mind when presented? Oh my gosh, I think all the time. I am what is it? Strong opinions loosely held. Anyway,
I think both of us really crave that. Like, I love to be wrong because I'm like, oh, I've learned something.
Okay, so for those that scored under 15 like us, no worries. We're going to chat about a couple things.
Yeah, I scored myself way higher, but now I'm downgrading.
How to build your adaptability muscle. We have a couple points. Do you want to start with one, Nat?
I actually think this one is a good one, deliberate discomfort. And actually, this is something that happened to me this weekend because I went to a fabulous wedding on Friday, and someone there was talking about a big life change, about moving cities and doing something quite different. And I suddenly thought like, oh, am I missing a trick here? Like, am I boring? And have I got myself stuck in a rut? I've lived in the same house for like a long time and the same city, and I've got lots of familiarity. So I think on that front, I had to keep challenging myself to go, am I just doing this because I feel like I should? Or should I move around? But I think in a day-to-day life, it's something we both do really well, which is putting ourselves in new situations. And I think some of the examples that have probably been kind of exhausting recently is things like I'm going to Singapore on the 15th of April and lining up a couple of events there and lining up a bunch of meetings with people I don't know. And that is very uncomfortable because everything's new, starting from a blank sheet of paper in a different country. I feel like all of that stuff, standing on stage, all of those things we do all the time. And I like that we use the phrase getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because I think sometimes it's easy to think for other people it is less uncomfortable, but actually what it is often like, and mostly like, is it's still deeply uncomfortable, but you get used to that feeling. And I feel like the same, I watch, my feed is full of ultra marathoners at the moment because I'm trying to surround myself with people who run. And one of the things I always find fascinating is they're always in pain. Like there is no level of running you get to where you go, oh, this is just really easy for me now. Exercise is a great example of you just constantly getting yourself uncomfortable and pushing yourself and working through the pain and realizing like you can endure some of that pain for longer than you realize. So yeah, I like that one. Deliberate discomfort and finding those opportunities to go, oh, I feel that feeling in my stomach, or I feel that little bit of discomfort. Can I do it anyway?
And I also wonder if you can't be uncomfortable in every arena in life, and maybe that your stability of what you have with a house and the city and friends is giving you the ability to be uncomfortable all the time in the workplace. So I just wonder imagine if we had 9-to-5 jobs, we could probably implant them to New York City.
But it is funny to stretch yourself to go, that is an area, like moving overseas is not something I want to do. Yeah. And I have to keep challenging myself as to why. Is it because I love it here? Is it because I'm a bit scared of it?
Building your adaptability muscle, point number 2, is what we call the learning loop. And we do this all the time. And so this is the concept of a feedback cycle. Make them really short. Anything that we do at PowerSuit, we know it's small. We take big tasks and break it down into small actions. And we're constantly checking back at how that went. So what worked, what didn't, what might we do differently next time? So I know that the tech world does that quite well with retrospectives. They kind of look back at that short sprint and kind of go, what's working, what's not, what might we do differently? And it's the same thing, is constantly getting into a learning loop and experimentation. So I'm going to speak up in this meeting, or I might have a goal and I'm going to create all these small actions related to it, and just check in at the end of each week or each month and go, what worked as part of those 3 steps to move into that goal? What's working, what's not? Because it forces you to stop, to reflect, and to do something differently, which is effectively adapting.
I love that. And then I just want to add one final one, which I haven't put a nice brand on yet, but it is something about being wrong, getting comfortable being wrong, because often when the world moves and changes a lot, we have a lot of opinions. We have a lot of information coming at us. We have existing ways of doing things, and getting comfortable being wrong. And that could be anything from you are in a leadership position and someone in your team does things in a different way than you. Fight the urge to try and fix it to your way. Or like you say, and I remember this with listening to Joe Rogan, who's someone I don't feel comfortable listening to. And he interviewed Trump after he got elected. And I was very curious as to why, because the media I see, it didn't make sense that many people voted for him, if I put it that way. And so I really wanted to listen and understand his perspective. And honestly, there were quite a few that I was like, I haven't thought about it that way before. Or I can actually see that perspective. And I feel like getting into that habit of being okay being wrong and going, I had this idea, but the other one was better, or I had this perspective on something, but this other person changed my mind, or I had this way of doing things and someone else changed it, and that's okay. And just getting really comfortable with that idea of we are all going to be wrong a lot of the time, because things are moving so quickly that what used to work may not work anymore. You may have been right at some point, but you're not anymore. Or you've let someone down. It's okay to we get that defensiveness feeling and go, actually, I was really wrong and I shouldn't have done that, or whatever it is, to just let go of that ego that a lot of us have intuitively to protect ourselves by never acknowledging when we are in the wrong.
That was the 4th question in that audit, was how often do you seek out perspectives that challenge your own? And that was the one that challenged me, because I don't want to watch Fox News and I don't want to listen to some of those things. And that makes me uncomfortable. So
another example at the moment, and I don't know if you've been following it, but we have in New Zealand a school lunch program, and there's a new minister who's in charge of it. And the media that I watch and listen to is so anti these changes. Like, you can just tell there is nothing right about these school lunches. They're blowing up, they're too hot, they're too cold, they're missing. And I feel like I have now gotten to a point where when I see that much, I can look at that critically and go, yeah, that is what happens when you've had big change. And there will be teething issues and jumping on a bandwagon of just like everything about it is wrong makes you feel good because it makes you feel like you're on the side of the right and this person's failed, but it's not right because actually, of course, if this was someone that you backed and you believed in the program, you would have a lot more grace for those challenges.
Yeah.
So like I often now go, if this was the person I voted for, or if this was a person that I thought was right, would I have the same response? And often I think you see it all the time in politics. It's not, because we respond differently depending on whether or not we align with them. And so just being able to stop and go, is this fair media coverage even? Even if it's media coverage I agree with, is it fair? And often it's not. It's really selling one side. And
not a little bit of MSM.
I know, well, it's true, but it is true. And I find that now I'm like, I just want accuracy. I just want to have balanced
truth.
Both sides of like, this is some good things and this is some bad things, because
we're losing that to Truth Social. No, I'm kidding. I know we're not. I think it's important, and I'm the same, actually. I think I'm actually quite centrist. I fall in the middle on a lot of things and like to see both perspectives. However, I am challenging myself to be in those places with other people's perspectives and to get uncomfortable. And sometimes that's hard it is hard in our own bubbles. So the action for this week is to choose an area of your life where you've been resistant to change. It could be at work, it could be in your personal lives, but the action and the invitation to you is to make one small, deliberate shift this week. So notice your resistance, that's our brain protecting us, and push through it. Do it anyway. So it could be updating your LinkedIn profile. It could be having a difficult conversation. It could be, I don't know, whatever it is.
Doing an IQ test. I'm obviously going to be moving to the other side of the world.
I've got a quote.
Mm-hmm. Of course you do.
I do. And I've been trying to get more women, of course, because women say incredible things. And
I'm not sure if this started from her, though.
Really?
I, funnily enough, found the same quote, but
is it not hers?
I had it attributed to Charles Darwin.
It's definitely, she said it. I can see.
Well, it might be a slightly different version. You say your version and I'll say my version, and one of them might have been influenced by the other.
So she might not have coined it, but she said it. And she said, it's not the strongest or most intelligent who survive, but those who can best manage change. And and that's Jane Goodall, our friend Jane. However, of course, Charles Darwin would have said it because that's evolution.
He said it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable.
Well, yeah, there you go. So Jane is just...
it's kind of common sense, isn't it?
And they're doing the same thing. They're just sitting in nature, observing, aren't they?
That's true.
So they're allowed to have that's their conclusion for a lifetime of observing.
But it's also, it is true. Like, I think all of us can look around and go, people leading countries, leading organizations, are they the strongest? Are they the most intelligent? Or are they the ones who managed to figure it out and jump on and do what was needed to be done to get where they got? And that should give us all a lot of comfort that actually we can all get there. We can get where we want to go, because it's not, you're not limited by your genius status like
we're growing. Oh, mine's sky high, by the way. But no, we can flex our adaptability muscle, which is the most critical. Like adopting even that new AI tool that you've been a little bit worried about, and any of those things. So thank you for giving us 5 stars, everyone. Let us know if you are committing to a small, deliberate action this week, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.